Good morning, Royal We Fellowship, and I am so happy that you are here with me this morning. Let's go ahead and open up in prayer. Our Father, who are in heaven, how holy is your name, and your kingdom will come, and your will shall be done here on this earth as it is in heaven. And we ask that you would give us this day and each and every day our daily portion, and forgive us of our sins as we forgive those who've sinned against us. Lead us not down a path that leads to temptation, and deliver us from the evil that surrounds us in this world. For Lord, the kingdom belongs to you, and you have all the power and all the glory. And everyone said, Amen. Now we are getting started just a couple minutes late as I was getting some technicalities worked out, but I'm glad that you are here this morning. And we're going to go ahead and jump right in because we have a lot of interesting things to discuss this morning. Now, if you have been following along with Royal We Fellowship, we've been going from the beginning to understand toxicity in the world, narcissistic abuse, and to reclaim an understanding of faith based on the new knowledge that we have of narcissism, of toxicity in the world, of good and evil. And we're going to continue on this journey. Now, in the last week, what we did see is how Adam and both Eve embodied their the reaction to being caught, to being found out, the fall, disobedience, and the true nature of humanity was displayed in both of them as they did a few things. They first tried to run and hide from being accountable for their actions. Then we see an attitude of trying to deflect or divert the attention to something other than what they messed up with, right? So first we see Adam and Eve run and hide from the presence of the Lord according to the ancient literature. Then we see when the Lord approached Adam specifically, we see the diversion, right? Hello, I'm naked here. When God said, "Where are you? Why are you hiding?" I'm naked here. This is why I'm hiding. It's not that we did anything wrong. It's just I realize I'm naked. I'm naked here. Can we, let's focus on that. Uh, and then the final thing was the blame. It's not my fault, right? As we see in the scriptures that we talked about last week in the ancient literature, what Adam did was blame. He blamed in one single sentence not only the woman that was with him, but also blamed God. So when God said, "Did you eat of the forbidden fruit? Did you partake in the tree of knowledge? Did you partake in that when I told you that it was something that was very dangerous for you?" And the response was, "Well, the woman that you gave me. So you're to blame and you're to blame," right? Uh, and this shows uh, ho- what happens once knowledge creeps in. Now, mind you, none of these tactics were displayed or even existed. These things of wanting to hide, of wanting to the desire to hide, the desire to divert attention from oneself, and the desire to avoid any responsibility. These things did not even come in. They didn't exist in our nature until the knowledge of good and evil came in. Once the knowledge of good and evil came in to the picture, now all of a sudden, these games naturally expose themselves because of this knowledge. So, with the knowledge of good and evil, also now comes the opportunity to avoid and to be careless and to be reckless and to find pride and to act out in all kinds of crazy ways. A little bit of craziness, actually, a lot of craziness comes with knowledge. Would you agree? And so, again, knowledge is not the same as wisdom, right? And understanding. Knowledge is something completely different. And so we're going to continue on today now with where we see after Adam and Eve were banished from perfection. We're going to pick up from there. And I'm following I'm in Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. So if you have a Bible, go ahead and follow along with me. And it says in 4, verse 1, Adam knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, "I have gotten a man from the Lord." Now, let's stop right here and understand something, that sexual intercourse did not happen until after the disobedience as well. So, sexual intercourse was not a part of the original nature of humanity, of the person, as was when God designed, according to the ancient literature. There was no need for any sexual intercourse. The concept of a helpmate, as it was given in the ancient literature in the garden, did not require any sexual activity, nor was it even a thought, nor was it a thing, even. There was no need for it. And what's interesting about this is that we find that virginity is often also discussed as purity, and that's for good reason. The reason purity is associated with virginity is because purity resembles that true original state of being, of existence, right? Where there was no sexuality, there was no intercourse, there was no need for it, nor was it a part of the existence of humanity. And there's a statement made by John Chrysostom in 407 AD. He says, "How great the esteem of virginity, surpassing human nature, demonstrating the characteristics of incorporeal powers. It's the first state of our being." And now what's interesting about virginity in the world is that it's reached a place over the past centuries and decades, and well, probably as long as we've lived, where virginity in a lot of ways is looked down on. It is mocked, criticized, ridiculed. There's an effort in the world to put such a pressure. It's pressured within social circles and societies and schools. I believe I read a statistic somewhere that an extremely high percentage, like 75% of young girls or young men, not young girls, young men, had a sexual experience in high school because of pressure, because of the social pressure, the peer pressure. You know, how tough can you be in school, or how cool can you be if you do not have that sexual experience? So there is an effort in the world to denounce, to criticize, and to ridicule that pure state because of its association with purity, with the original state of humanity. And the world hates that. The world absolutely hates that. And not only is there pressure, but there's also molestation. There are also rapes. There are also, and these horrible, atrocious things happen. And it's a direct result to go against the purity and the understanding of what could possibly be pure. So now that the world is fallen and broken, the push is against the possibility of purity, because purity is the closest thing that resembles the initial being, the initial state of being of the person. That purity represents the closest to the image of perfection that people were initially created to be. You follow me on that? The world hates it. The world hates it, and will do everything to try to denounce that power and to denounce that purity and to grab that purity and to pull it down into the depths of confusion and chaos and sexuality and immorality. Pull it down into that so that there is none that could sit in that place of being pure. And does this make sense to you? So now, out of this sexual experience that Adam and Eve had both partaken in, on to verse 2, Genesis chapter 4, verse 2, and she bore Cain. Sorry, at the end of verse 1, she bore Cain. Okay, it's the first son. Verse 2, and she bore his brother Abel. So again, she had another child. Now Abel was the keeper of the sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. Now, I find it very interesting that they had these tasks to do that were, in a way, beneficial for the entire family. One was a keeper of sheep. The other was a tiller of the ground. Unlike today's children, which one is keeper of Mario Kart, typically on an iPad, and the other is keeper of whatever, Minecraft on another tablet, right? So they had these real responsibilities at such a young age. This is also something that has typically been forgotten, you know. They both had responsibilities. That's the point. And now in verse 3, we're going to see some interesting things take place. And by the way, it doesn't give us the exact age of Cain and Abel during this time and what we're about to see unfold. But if I were to make an educated uh, understanding, my best guesstimation, if you will, of the age, I would say they were anywhere between the ages of 8 and 18, about that 10-year span, maybe 12 years to 18. I believe that at the age of 12 is typically where there's an understanding and the ability to do this type of work, keep sheep, till the ground. So they're still very young. 12 to 18 would be my guesstimation of the age. But again, this is not something that we're given that information. But it's at a place and it's at an understanding, it's at an age where all the pieces are not yet there. All the growth and all the understanding is not quite there. And we're going to see how this plays out. Now, in time, and I'm on chapter 4, verse 3 now, in time, Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. This is commonly referred to as the first fruits. And Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. Now, what's interesting about the ancient texts of the Bible is we often get a lot of information in the little bit extra that is added. So in the case of this, we see that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground. And that's it. It says nothing else. He brought of the fruit. Okay. But when it talks about Abel's offering, he brought the firstlings of his flock and the fat thereof. That added extra description is telling us something great and monumental. It's telling us a lot about the difference in the sacrifice. One is not descriptive because there was no reason to describe what Cain brought. It is what it is. He brought some fruit, whatever that means. And I believe this is a representation of the heart of Cain at that time. It's a careless, whatever it is, here you go, there's some fruit, enjoy. Whereas opposed to Abel's sacrifice was careful, was selected, was more sacrificial. You can look at Cain's as not being a sacrifice, but more of a here's some fruit, enjoy. Whereas Cain's was sacrificial. Why? Because of the added statement, the fat thereof, meaning the best thereof. Meaning it was carefully chosen. It was looked at and said, that is something right there that would be a sacrifice, because that is something that typically we would want to keep for ourselves because it's the fat of the flock. It is the most rich of the flock. It's rare that we get that fat richness, and what we are attempting to do, that is what I'm going to sacrifice, in understanding that it's not from me that I get this richness. So I'm going to give it back in faith that would be resupplied. That is called a sacrifice. We don't get that. So it's important to pay attention to these small details because they give us monumental answers. It's just the same as we talked about on the very first Royal We Fellowship, where God defined the light and darkness, right? When he separated good from evil. It wasn't talking about the sun. It wasn't talking about the physical light and darkness. It was talking about good and evil. And what was the differentiation, right? It said in the beginning that God divided the light from the darkness, and he what? He called light good. Period. Right there, that little extra defines in a huge way exactly what we need to understand. One was given a description of being good. The other was not, which means it is the opposite of good. It is absent of good. Okay? So it's in these small things that we find big statements that the ancient literature is trying to share with us. So here in this case, we see that Abel, in fact, just by looking at the fact that he brought the fat of the fattest of the flock, of the flocklings, we see what's really being told to us is that um, we're seeing a story here of careful selection and sacrifice versus carelessness, the opposite of careful. We are seeing faith and gratitude being displayed versus no faith and no gratitude being displayed. Even though on the outside it looks like they're doing the same thing, that added extra is saying they are not doing the same thing. One is very selfless and sacrificial. The other is very careless and reckless and is just, well, here you go, whatever. And we're about to see how this plays out. And we're also going to see the ultimate understanding of where we find our true purpose and calling in life, okay? Because not all things and not all punishment, or sometimes we look at punishment, sometimes we look at redirection as being a horrible thing, but in reality, it's only horrible if we allow it to be. We're going to see that play out, right? Now we see that the fact that God in verse 3 and 4, we see that the act of God accepting Abel's sacrifice of the fattest of the flocklings and not accepting and not showing favor to Cain's giving him some whatever fruit of the ground, okay? We see that Cain was angry at this. And in verse 6 of Genesis chapter 4, in the ancient literature, it says, God approaches or confronts Cain and says, why are you angry? And why has your countenance fallen? Meaning, why is your light dimming, basically? Why is your light dimming? Why is your goodness being retracted? You're going from light, which is good, and you're slipping into darkness. Your thoughts, your mind, everything is sinking in. What is going on? And what's interesting is that obviously God knows, but he's asking because he wants to have a dialogue with Cain. Why would he want to have dialogue with Cain? Because the heart of God is for redirection. The heart of God, according to the ancient literature, the heart of the Lord is for repentance. It always has been, ever since the beginning. The conversations that we see the Lord having with both Adam and Eve and now Cain is an effort to bring forth that change. It's also a good indication to understand the power of free will. If you look at the way in which the ancient literature is expressing the Lord's confrontation of us, it's an expression that shows that the Lord is giving us this free will that not even the Lord can manipulate, but rather the Lord wants to challenge and draw us near for good reasons. The Lord is looking for repentance. The Lord is looking for you to favor the way of the Lord so that you can be blessed, as opposed to hardening of your heart so you live a life of being cursed and bringing about the consequences of selfishness and of pride. And we are going to see this in Cain. Why are you angry? Why has your countenance fallen? The Lord asked Cain. And he challenges Cain, saying, if you do well, shall not you be accepted? If you do well, you will be accepted. We see again here the loving grace, saying it's not over yet. Do not fall into this idea that everything is bad, that everything is over. If you do well, will you not be accepted? Saying you have chance after chance. Listen, it's progression. It's not the end all. This one sacrifice, this one giving, this one mistake, this one misunderstanding, this one act of carelessness is not the end of everything. Don't you understand that if you can simply change some of your ways, and there's a good reason why the Lord was also trying to redirect Cain in this situation, and you're going to see this in just a moment as well. So he says, if you do well, shall you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at your door. and you shall be its desire, and you must rule over it. What is the desire? What is the sin that desires Cain's life? It's the sin that desires all of our lives to some extent, and we are all vulnerable to this evil, and that is the image of pride. That's the image of pride. What we see is the image of pride being propped up for the first time ever in the story of Cain and Abel. And how many of you are aware that pride is one of the most sinful things, and it is the killer? Pride is the ultimate killer of all relationships and of everything. We see it being propped up for the first time in the heart of Cain. What we see is initially, and we can only imagine what was going on in the heart, but what I believe God was seeing, or the Lord in the ancient literature, is this pride speaking on Cain's behalf, saying, I will not be second in the situation. I am the firstborn. No matter what, no matter how lousy my offering was, I am the firstborn. I will not place second. I will be acknowledged first and foremost because I am the firstborn. And the Lord in the ancient literature is warning Cain ahead of time that this pride is sin, that this pride will be a downfall, that this pride is what you must overrule. This is what the Lord in the story of the ancient literature is trying to do. You must rule over this. You must rule over this concept, this evil that's crept in, that has propped up this pride, that is saying, I am the firstborn and I can do what I want carelessly and still be the firstborn, and I will not be second. This is the downfall. This is the entitlement. This is how many of you see this entitlement, this pride that is existing all around us every single day as people are out in mobs who do absolutely nothing in the way of sacrifice, but demand, I will not be second. You see college kids turning down and attempting to fight and bully their own professors, saying, I will not be second to you. It does not matter the years of education you put in. I will not be second because I am me and I have more rights and I am the only thing that matters and you do not, right? It's this pride that is sin. This is the sin that in this ancient literature, the ancient people trying to warn us of. This is the sin that leads to killing. This is the sin that leads people to death. Not only of other people, but also of themselves. And yes, it is ultimately a fall from a true position of power into a place of death, as we're going to see was Cain's ultimate destination in this ancient story. Now, in this dialogue, what we see, as I said, is the image of the pride being propped up within Cain of, I will not be second, I am the firstborn. We see that God is in attempt to offer grace and redirection to Cain, is telling him, you must rule over this. Sin is at your door. It desires you. So one of the important things to understand is pride desires us. Pride desires us. It is in that realm of outside of ourselves, the thoughts, the evil one, the devil, that speaks to us and through us, and its desire is for us. It crouches at your door. It's waiting for you. So pride is something that is influenced from the outside of us. It's not something that is naturally born within us. Pride is something that creeps in from the outside. It is the world that surrounds us. It is the people we hang around. It is the education that we bring in. That is where pride comes from. It's the enemy from the outside creeping inside of us that takes away and strips away our ability and our desire to pursue what's right, and instead fills us with entitlement and pride. Now we see in chapter 4, verse 8, that Cain then out of this pride rose up against his brother Abel out of a fit of this misunderstanding, this sin, this jealousy, and slew him. Cain killed his brother Abel in this situation. This is pride fulfilled. This is the ancient people's understanding of telling us that this is the ultimate destination of pride, of entitlement. The entitlement's desire is to kill and get rid of what's right and instead live in this place of entitlement without doing anything right. And this is very sad because in the reality of what we see, the opportunity existed for sacrifice to place Cain into his rightful place and purpose. Now, many people would say that it's very sad that the Lord in the ancient story would reject Cain's offering and accept Abel's sacrifice. But what we're going to see here is what the Lord was actually attempting to do is prime Cain for his full potential so that Cain could rise up to be who he was called to be, his true purpose, which was even far beyond that of Abel's. Yes, Cain was to be called to be above Abel. This was Cain's true purpose in the situation, and we're going to see that right here. And so, yes, how many of you have heard the term that God chastens those whom he loves and those whom he gives great responsibility to? In other words, he makes things harder for those who have great responsibility. This in conversation is a representation of that. The ancient people are trying to tell us that the Lord was pressing into Cain, saying, you are called to something great. Without saying this, saying you're called to something even greater. This bit about this offering of the fruit that you gave me, it needs to be corrected on your end because you have something so much greater that you are supposed to be doing and you're missing it. But Cain, in his pride, did not understand it. He couldn't see past himself. He couldn't see past the pettiness of the fruit offering versus the flock offering of Abel. But we're going to see exactly what Cain's true purpose was right here in a minute. The Lord said unto Cain, this is after Cain killed his brother Abel, and I'm in verse 9, chapter 4, Genesis chapter 4, verse 9. And the Lord said unto Cain, where is your brother? Now, this was not said because God, in the ancient story, in the ancient literature, they're not saying that the Lord did not know where Abel was. Surely he knew. It's the same as when the Lord was calling out to Adam and Eve when they were hiding. The Lord said, Adam, where are you? It's not because the Lord did not know where Adam was. In the same case, right here, the Lord is not asking Cain because the Lord didn't know what happened. The Lord knew exactly what happened. But what the Lord, according to the ancient story, is doing here is telling Cain his purpose. He's making it clear to him, and right in front of his face, he's telling Cain who he really is and who he was supposed to be and why it was so important for Cain to acknowledge and to take responsibility because he had the ultimate role. And Cain instantly knew this and rejected that role. What is this role? Cain's answer to the Lord in the ancient story tells us exactly what Cain's role was. The Lord said unto Cain, where is Abel your brother? Because the Lord is pressing into Cain's true purpose. And Cain's response was, am I my brother's keeper? And now this is what the unfortunate and the tragic part of this ancient understanding is that the reality is yes, Cain was to be his brother's keeper. High above the ranks of offering a simple, a fat firstling of the flock. High above the ranks of offering fruit of the ground. Cain was to be the authority over his brother's keeper. And this is why in the ancient story, the Lord said to Cain, "Where is your brother?" He's saying, I put you responsible for your brother. You are of the highest order within your relationship with your brother Abel. You are the firstborn. You are your brother's keeper. You are the guide. You are the one to show the direction. You are the one to live the example. You are the one who is your brother's keeper. I placed you in the highest position. And Cain rejected that position over the pride and entitlement of the small issue of not being the best at this sacrificial offering, the fruit versus the lamb. Now, this is what pride and entitlement does. It distracts people from understanding what their true purpose in their life actually is. And most who fall into the sin of pride and entitlement will completely miss and avoid their true calling, which is high above the realms of what they even would think. Yes, Cain was given the highest position of responsibility and authority that the Lord had destined, but Cain had rejected it. Cain rejected it. And now, what we see here is the image of the world that we live in. It's a world that is divided into two. It's those who, through gratitude and gratefulness, risk sacrifice, put in the time, put in the effort, give everything they have, sacrificially, out of gratitude, out of thankfulness, out of understanding that some things in this life we have no control over. So if we can give back the best of what we get and the best of what we have inside, then we have faith that it's going to be restored that much more. This is the difference between those who have faith and those in something greater, something outside, and those who do not have faith of a higher order. Those who do not have faith that if they sacrifice, that something more of a blessing will be bestowed. And this is the difference between those who have the gratitude and the carefulness and sacrifice versus those who are careless, prideful, and rather than accept responsibility, their highest calling, which, by the way, those who live in their responsibility of highest calling, even though it seems like your sacrifice is not enough at times, if you continue to live and you continue to learn about even the rejections of your small sacrifices, over time, you will grow into your full calling and you'll be exalted high above that, which is what the effort was in the ancient story of the Lord taking Cain on this journey. In essence, the Lord is saying, don't worry about this fruit in the conversation. Don't you understand there's something far more greater that you are battling here, and that is that sin at your door that is desiring to take you over, the pride. If you can sacrifice yourself to this pride, meaning if you can sacrifice yourself to beat the pride, then you will be exalted into your fullest potential, which is the acknowledgement and understanding that you are the firstborn, the keeper of your brother Abel, high up in the ranks. But if you do not, then the sin that desires you, the pride that desires you, will drag you down into the depths of hell, into murder, into chaos, and you will never fully realize your full potential. You will never reach that place of exaltation. You will never reach your purpose. This is the story of the world that we are in since then. Now, I find it very interesting, the other image, and I've talked about this in videos. Now, what we see, one brother and one brother. One understood the sacrifice, the sacrifice and the gratitude. The other did not. We see this split in today's world still to this day. It seems as though people want to know why it seems like every other person they meet is narcissistic. Why is it that we see in this world so much people who act entitled and prideful? And rather than work and sacrifice in life, they just want and need simply because they exist. Therefore, they feel entitled to it, to the point of killing and fighting and murdering other people who are otherwise good people who are trying to sacrifice. Why do we see this? Well, because this is now the image of the world that we have. This story represents the truth and the reality of the world that we live in. This is acknowledgement and validation for you and for me. This tells us right now that, yes, we live in a world that is split. Just as Cain and Abel were split in their idea and their mentality, so is the entire world. We live in a world where this split is just about 50-50. And we see other stories in the scripture that acknowledge and validate this split. There's the story of the farmer who sowed the good seed. And this is a parable that Jesus taught in the New Testament. And late at night, the enemy sowed weeds and tares into where the farmer sowed good seed. And then in that parable, they begin to grow together. And it's almost, you get this image again of a 50-50 split. You get good wheat that was with hard work and effort growing along with the tares and the weeds that was sown by the enemy. The pridefulness, the arrogance, it's 50-50. And in the parable, the keepers of the field went to the farmer and said, hey, should we go and start tearing out the weeds and tares right now? And the answer was no. Let them grow together. And the reason is because if you uproot them now, you may uproot some of the good with the weeds and tares, but let them grow until the time of harvest. At the time of harvest, they will completely be separated. Then we could bundle up the weed and the tares and destroy them. This is an image of, in a lot of ways, what the ancient people are telling us about the world and the direction that it's going. The prideful, arrogant entitlement of the world is growing up along with the good and those who wish and desire to be good and fruitful. And they're growing together, and we are entering into that time where you see the division taking place. And the division has always been there. And so that the weeds and the tares and the entitlement can be bundled up and done away with. Okay? And this is a story, ultimately, of the good versus evil. And it's a story of what we all need to pay attention to and have this understanding that the image we've been given through the story is the image of the world that we live in. It is split 50-50. So for those of you who want to know why the world seems narcissistic, it's because every other person you meet has these tendencies, possibly. I find it also very interesting to know that in the world, this is validated with statistics. According to the NCADV, which is the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, we can see that 48% of people, both men and women, are abused mentally, emotionally, or physically. 48% that's nearly half. And this is just those that are reported, which, would probably account for the other 3%, making it 50%, right? So it's safe to say and understand that, yes, we live in this dichotomy. This is good and this is evil. And it was shown to us in this image of what causes that. The rise of pride, the rise of this evil that desires us. Pride desires us all. It's good to have your safeguards up against this. I'm glad that you were here this morning. And for those of you who are new to this channel, be sure to subscribe and join us next Saturday at 9 o'clock a.m. Central Standard Time as we get into continuing on in this journey of understanding the reality of the toxicity of the world that we live in and what the text of the ancient writings of the scriptures are trying to tell us about this world that we live in. Also, be looking for more videos on the Royal We channel, and join me also Monday night at 9 o'clock p.m. Central Time for Royal We Live Chat. Have a blessed day, and we will see you next weekend.